When I got the call about a security guard position at the old Maple Street warehouse, I didn't hesitate. It was a quiet town and night shifts paid decently. The guy who interviewed me over the phone, a gruff-sounding man named Rick, barely asked me anything. He just said, "Show up at 9 p.m. sharp tomorrow, bring a flashlight." He then hung up on me abruptly. I really don't even think he asked me my name. I got this odd feeling from it, but considering the pay they were offering, I couldn't complain much at all. It was twice the normal pay around me, and I was honestly just excited for a change in my life. I had been working construction all my life and wanted a change. The pay was around $43 an hour. I arrived early, the warehouse looming against a blood-red sunset. Rick was waiting outside. He was in his late 40s, with salt and pepper stubble and tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He gave me a quick once-over before tossing me a flashlight. "Follow me," he said. Something about Rick just seemed weird, almost as if he were relieved to see me. He brought me through the parking lot, finally asking me my name. "Jordan," I said. "Well, then, nice to meet you there, Jordan. Follow me inside." The place smelled of dust and mildew, with a faint chemical tang that made my nose sting. Rows upon rows of mannequins stood silently, their featureless faces catching the dim glow of our flashlights. Some were propped on stands, others slumped against walls. They wore no clothes, just their plastic skin, smooth and pale. "Creepy, right?" Rick asked with a smirk. I nodded. "Why so many mannequins?" "Used to be a factory back in the 80s, he explained. "Now it's storage. No one's bothered to clear it out. Makes for a good scare on Halloween." He paused, then turned to face me. "Listen, kid, this job's pretty straightforward. Patrol the place, check every aisle, and make sure no one's breaking in." "Got it," I said. "Oh, and one more thing." His tone shifted, low and serious. "You're going to think I'm messing with you, but I'm dead serious. Check every mannequin's face, every single one." I'd blinked. "What? Why?" He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. "Because sometimes they change." I laughed nervously. "Come on, Rick. Is this some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy?" Rick didn't smile. "Sometimes one of them comes alive. You'll see its face, real human eyes, a mouth, skin. If you spot one, don't think, just shoot. It'll go back to normal. But if you miss it," he trailed off, scanning the dark aisles, "it'll wait in the dark, and when you're not looking, it'll come for you. Even if you don't manage to see it on your scan and you hear movement, aim for the head." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. "You serious?" I said finally. "As a heart attack," Rick said. "You'll thank me later." Something in me still didn't believe him one bit. I thought maybe I was even being recorded for some kind of prank show or something. Nonetheless, we continued, Rick kind of brushing our conversation off. The first night was uneventful, though eerie. The warehouse was giant on the inside, and when it was pitch black, it made for a creepy environment. Rick and I patrolled together. He seemed to know the warehouse like the back of his hand, moving silently between the rows of mannequins. Every time I tried to talk, I was hushed by Rick. Even if I started to whisper, he didn't seem to want me making any noise at all. I tried to shake off his warning, but every time my flashlight landed on a mannequin's blank face, I felt a shiver. "See anything?" Rick asked as we passed through the eastern wing. "Nope, just a bunch of creepy dolls." "Good, let's keep it that way." We continued our patrols, scanning aisle to aisle, going from face to face. One thing that weirded me out was that Rick was very thorough with his checks, scanning each mannequin with precision, almost sometimes double-taking. The patrols for the night rounded off, and we went into the security room to grab our stuff and head out for the night. At this point, I didn't really know if Rick was just messing with me or not, yet he never laughed it off or revealed it as a prank, so I was uneasy. The next night, I noticed Rick's nerves. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his hand never straying far from his sidearm. "They're sneaky," he muttered. "Real sneaky." We continued through one of the tightest sections of mannequins very slowly. He then suddenly spun a 180 and absolutely smoked a mannequin that was suddenly right behind us. There was no possible way for the mannequin to have gotten there, but there it laid, face down. It wasn't possible for Rick to have put it there either, and that's what truly scared me. Rick then casually picked the mannequin up and placed it back into the sea of them. I stood there speechless as Rick muttered, "Believe me now?" It wasn't until the third night that I truly did believe him. For some reason, I did not believe him that night. I thought him doing that was another one of his jokes. Maybe he was just a twisted man. I was alone in the northern wing, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I guess I earned the trust of Rick at this point to allow me to go off and do separate areas, although I didn't really like it, if I was being honest. As I scanned the row of mannequins, one of them caught my eye. Its face, it wasn't blank. It had features, a nose, lips, eyes that glistened with a wet sheen, staring right at me. It smiled. I blinked and it was gone, back to being a mannequin, or was that a different one? "Rick!" I shouted, my voice echoing. He came running, his flashlight bouncing wildly. "What is it?" I pointed. "That one. I think it had a face." I gestured again, but the mannequin stood there, lifeless. Rick didn't hesitate. He drew his gun and fired. The mannequin jerked as the bullet struck it, and for a split second, I saw its face again. It screamed, a horrible, inhuman sound, before collapsing to the floor. "Doja," Rick said, reloading. "Now you believe me." I nodded, my hands shaking. "What the hell are these things?" Rick's face was grim. "I don't know, but they've been here for years, and they don't like us being here." "Well, then why the hell are we here?" I asked. Rick laughed and said, "The money, I guess." I slowly made my way over and placed the mannequin back into its spot. By the end of the week, I'd gotten used to the routine. Patrol, check faces, shoot if necessary. Rick said it was unusual to see more than 3 or 4 a week, but that week we saw 6. Each one seemed to get closer to us than the last. On the last night of my training, things went to hell. We were midway through our rounds when the power cut out. Total darkness. Even our flashlights seemed dimmer, their beams barely penetrating the shadows. "Stay close," Rick said, his voice tight. The mannequins seemed closer. Rows that had been orderly now looked jumbled, as if they'd shifted while we weren't looking. We slowly made our rounds as the aisles of mannequins' lifeless faces barely illuminated in the low light. The slower we walked, the closer the mannequins seemed to get to us. How was that even possible, I asked myself. "Quiet," Rick whispered. Then I heard a soft shuffling sound. "They're moving," Rick whispered. "Stay calm. Aim for the face." They suddenly came from all sides, mannequins with distorted human-like faces, their limbs jerking unnaturally as they closed in. We fired, hitting them one by one, but for every one we dropped, 2 more appeared, then more. Rick shouted, "Get to the control room. There's a backup generator, and they hate light." We ran, the mannequins in pursuit. We fired backwards while running. I could hear their joints creaking, their raspy breaths. One grabbed Rick, dragging him down. He screamed, "Go! Don't stop!" I hesitated, but his eyes, they weren't pleading. They were resigned. He was tired of this, and I already was too. I made it to the control room and flipped the generator switch. Lights flooded the warehouse, and the mannequins froze, their twisted faces locked in place, but Rick was gone. Then suddenly, all of the mannequins in unison began shaking very erratically. I immediately ran back to the light switch and flipped it off. All of the mannequins stopped shaking, and I took a deep breath. I immediately said, "Screw this," and went for a full sprint out the front door and to my car in the parking lot. I fumbled the keys as I tried to pull them out and unlock the door. That's when I looked up and seen eyes glowing and staring at me from the warehouse door. I wasted no time and got into my car and started driving, peeling out of the parking lot fast. I felt immediate relief and just wanted to go home at this point. Though as I was driving, I started seeing familiar trees and landmarks, and that's when I realized I had somehow drove right back to the warehouse. How could this be, I asked myself. Speeding past the warehouse, cursing, now in the opposite direction. I knew something was wrong. This place wasn't letting me leave, and I didn't know why. I drove for a while longer this time, but then again, there it was, the warehouse. My phone never worked in this area due to service, but we had a landline in the office. If I could make it there, I thought to myself, I I ran into the building, full sprint, straight into the office and locked the door. I picked up the phone and started to dial 911, but as soon as I did, a loud buzzing sound followed by a high-pitched screech occurred. I slammed the phone down out of frustration. Am I stuck here? I asked myself. Weeks passed, everything is quiet. The usual 2 mannequins a week turned into only 1, and sometimes even none. I am stuck here and I have no more purpose. Rick failed to mention the food supply I found downstairs. I also always wondered why he never had a car, and I think I know why now. He could never leave this place, just like me now. I do my rails only once a day now, just to keep it safe for myself, and that's when it happened. One night, I saw him standing among the mannequins. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. His teeth were sticking out in ways they shouldn't have. "Rick?" I whispered, my flashlight trembling. He turned, and his mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. His voice was a hollow echo. "Your turn."